The all-important difference between supply chain requirements and solutions. Well, joining us today to speak about that, Steve Hopper, founder and principal of Inviscid Consulting. Steve, great to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Steve, let's just drill down into what we just mentioned at the top of the interview, the difference, the contrast between requirements and solutions when you're building a supply chain. Let's make that contrast. What is that difference? Let's talk about that.
Well, there are two important elements, but requirements come first, and solutions should match requirements. If you look at the engineering method, the first step is define the problem. And unfortunately, a lot of businesses over time have begun with looking at the solutions before they really knew what problem it was they were trying to solve.
Was it a shiny object that they wanted to buy, to invest in?
The latest toy, right?
There you go. So the way to do it then is to map out clearly what your issue is, what needs tending to before you start thinking about investments. Good.
Right.
Well, clearly though, both are very, very important.
Sure. Yeah, you can't really begin looking at the solution until you know what that problem is. And the right place to start is usually with data. Usually it's a numbers-driven exercise. You've got to really determine, what do your orders look like? What do your SKUs look like? What kinds of customers do you have, and how do they need to be served? What are their requirements? And by defining all of this, you get a really clear picture of what does success look like. And at that point, then you can turn around and start looking at all these wonderful solutions, like you mentioned, ranging from very manual to very automated and everything in between, which can be which one of those is going to be the right solution to solve that particular problem.
You know, we're talking to each other at the annual CSCMP conference. Now, you're not suggesting I shouldn't be walking around the floor, the exhibit floor here, and not taking a gander at some of these really interesting solutions. Clearly, one should explore these things. Isn't that correct?
Certainly, but there is a danger for those that are easily swayed by things that are sexy. You know, it's like if I'm looking for a new car, if I go to the Ferrari dealership, and I see the Spider, I might say, wow, that is a really cool car. But I need to take a step back and say, what kind of car do I really need? Mm-hmm. Do I have a family that I'm trying to transport? Do I have a trailer I need to tow? Am I going to be driving off-road? Do I need performance, such as a Ferrari? All of these things need to be weighed out really before that decision is made, so that you're really focusing on the solution after the needs have been really defined.
Okay, so you've convinced me that I need to pay attention to both of these things, and certainly need to start with my requirements. But let's talk about a process. If I'm going to improve my supply chain operations, I clearly need to have some type of process, some methodology, some kind of guide to how to proceed. So advise me, what do I need to do? Where do I actually start, and how do I proceed from there?
Well, like I said, it often starts with data, and that's kind of the tedious, not very exciting part of the process. You really have to look at the numbers, the devil's in those details. Mm-hmm. And once the numbers have been refined, then it's looking at a planning horizon. Uh-huh. Are we going to select a solution for where we are today? Uh-huh. Or are we looking at a solution that's going to be for where we're going to be in 5 years, 3 years, 20 years? So the executives who are managing the organization have to look strategically at where are we going? What's going to be different about our business at that planning horizon, so that we're not only looking for a solution that's fit for today, but for the future. So projecting forward those numbers, using things like growth factors, things that are changing in the business. Are there going to be mergers and acquisitions potentially in play? Is the product mix going to change? And all of those have to be defined before the solutions can really be looked at.
You know, you begin to make me suspect that I'm not entirely sure what my supply chain requirements are. Can you help me define them?
Yes, and that's what's interesting is so many companies really don't know what their requirements are, if I may say so. There are many companies that just start by barging ahead with solutions, and then when I come in as the objective consultant trying to keep a cool head about things and leave the emotion out of things, and I start asking these questions about the data, the SKUs, the orders, the volumes, all of these things, sometimes I get a dumb look because the reality is they really have not begun thinking about what are their meaningful requirements that they have to plan for. So that's where I come in, and if they have their own team, they can do that and really define those functional and operational requirements they're trying to hit as their target.
So once you've walked me through that and I now understand what my requirements are, when should I now begin to start thinking about solutions and investment?
That's a great question. So once the requirements have been defined, and of course there may be some a committee type decision that has to be made there, but there has to be a stake in the ground that says this is really the target we're trying to hit. From that point, it's exactly the right time to start looking at different ways to solve that problem, to meet those requirements. I worked with a client one time that we looked at, no joke, 22 different methods of order picking for their product to try to examine which was going to be the best one based on their requirements. So in that case, they didn't zero in on one exciting, sexy solution to start with. They really approached it objectively. And they said, what are all the possibilities, the possible ways that we could do this? And then they found the right one that was the right fit.
Steve, forgive me, but I've already begun to explore solutions out there before you and I have even begun to speak about what my requirements are. What can go wrong now?
Well, I could tell you a lot of stories, and we'll save that to protect the innocent, so to speak. But it's what happens a lot of times if the solution is put before the requirements. Risks go way up. Potentially the wrong solution entirely. I was telling someone recently I visited an electronics distributor that had an ASRS in their building that sat empty. No lights, no product being stored in it. And I asked the gentleman giving me the tour, what's the story behind that? And it was just what I expected. Said somebody came along and said, we got to have ASRS. So they bought the system, installed it, and big waste of money, big waste of space, and the opportunity cost of that they could have perhaps put into the right solution was wasted.
Since you're not going to tell us who that is, can you tell us how much money was actually?
It was in the millions.
weighted?
I didn't wasn't involved in the procurement of it, but I know from looking at it, multi-aisle ASRS, millions of dollars were put into that.
So these are staggering potential losses that we're talking about. Steve, this is actually a fascinating conversation because if anything is cart before the horse, this really is it. You are saving people a lot of money. Listen, thank you for finding the time to speak with us today. Great conversation, great benefits for people who are watching us today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Steve Hopper, Inviscid Consulting, speaking with us today about supply chain requirements coming before your solutions. Thank you for watching.